So what do you say we spend a little time in the garden today? All right. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, since COVID has happened, there has been a huge increase in people wanting to garden or grow their own food. And we've seen this firsthand with our business. Huge demand for seeds and tools, and just a lot more people out there wanting to grow a vegetable garden. A lot of these people were now working from home, or maybe they weren't able to work at all and they're at home with their kids and they want something fun to do outside, and so gardening seemed like a great idea. And we think this is great. Always good to see more people wanting to grow their own food. But as a part of this, we've started to get a lot more questions about, how do I start a garden? I want to start a garden in my backyard. How do I do it? How do I create a new garden plot? Or we've even had some people who maybe just had a few raised beds and they want to increase their garden size and now go to an in-ground garden, and they want to know, how can they do that? So today I want to take some time and explain a couple different techniques and strategies that you could use for creating a new garden plot, and these will hopefully help you be fairly successful in your first year of in-ground gardening. And also, some of you out there may already have an in-ground garden and just want to add another plot and want to know the best way to do that. So we'll try to cover that as well today. So before we talk about how to actually create a garden, let's talk about how big of a garden do you need. And one of the most common mistakes we see out there with new gardeners is they try to go too big initially, and what happens is they don't have the time to keep up with the garden, and it just kind of gets overgrown weeds or becomes a mess, and they get frustrated. And you don't want to grow too big of a garden in that first year or two. You want to keep something small and manageable, because if you're just starting out at this, you're probably not used to having to maintain the garden and keep up with it. You might not be aware of how much time it's going to take, you know, to keep everything weeded and watered and fertilized and happy and all that good stuff. So don't try to go too big initially. You know, if you're doing raised beds, I would say, you know, just a few raised beds at first, just to kind of understand how everything works, and you can always add more later. If you're doing an in-ground garden, I think something like a 20 by 20 on up to maybe a 40 by 40 is a great starting point, just depending on how much time you have to spend in the garden. So you don't need to grow a really huge garden initially. In a 40 by 40 garden, you can grow a lot of food to feed a family of 4. Of course, here we have 10 plots. We have a lot of garden here, but that's mainly because we have this YouTube channel and like to show people different things, different ways, different techniques, and show people a lot of different varieties. But if I was just growing food for my family and didn't have this YouTube channel, I would imagine 1 or 2 40 by 40 plots would be plenty for us. So you don't need a real big garden. Don't, you know, get stars in your eyes and want to make this huge garden. Start with one plot, and this is going to depend on how much room you have, but start with one plot or a few raised beds, and you can always add more plots or raised beds later. But you want to figure out the small things, understand how much time it's going to take care of that garden, and then you can always increase it later. So do something that's manageable, do something that you can keep up with, and this will help you be a lot more successful than if you try to grow too big. Now, as far as the actual size or dimensions of raised beds or an in-ground plot, as far as raised beds go, I would say just do whatever is the most economic use of lumber. We've seen lumber prices increase a little bit with COVID, and you don't want to be making a lot of cuts and wasting a lot of lumber. So do something that matches up with the, you know, length of lumber you can buy. You know, make it 4 foot wide by 8 foot wide, so you're not wasting any a whole lot of the board there. So just think about that. If you're building some raised beds, just kind of do it based on whatever's the most efficient use of the lumber or the materials that you're going to have to buy. As far as an in-ground garden goes, I always prefer a square plot or something close to square. I mean, these plots behind me here are 30 by 35, so they're pretty close to square. 30 by 40 is fine, 40 by 50 would be fine. You know, anything square or relatively close to that, I think is a great idea. It just makes it easier to manage. I have a couple plots that are kind of rectangular and long, and I don't like those as much as I do these plots that are close to square. So now let's talk about the actual soil. How do we get the soil ready to plant a new garden? Well, if you're doing raised beds, you're building some kind of rectangular or square structure, and you're going to be filling that with some kind of medium to plant into. You're not really using the native soil, you're adding soil within that box there that you're going to be growing in. And I've seen this mistake happen before, where people just go in and fill these things completely with compost, or fill them completely with, say, bag potting mix. And while those things are usually pretty fertile and you can grow good stuff in there, the problem is the water retention. Those things, good compost, potting soil, things like that, almost drain too well, and you're going to spend a lot more time watering than you really should have to. So don't just go all compost or all potting mix. I would recommend filling the majority of it with just some good topsoil, and then topping off the top there with, you know, several inches of compost or whatever you can get your hands on. But I wouldn't just fill it completely with potting mix or compost there. If you're growing a garden in ground, then there's a lot more variables that come into play as far as how you can set up the garden and get it ready to be planted. So for an in-ground garden situation, it's going to depend largely on the equipment or the resources you have. Do you have a tiller? Do you have a tarp? Do you have access to good compost? All those things are going to come into play as far as how you actually develop this new plot and get it ready for planting. If you're putting a new in-ground plot in your backyard, you probably have grass there currently. And I'm not familiar with the grass species up north, but down here it's probably either centipede, Bermuda grass, you could have Bahia grass, or even St. Augustine grass, or a mixture of all of those. So you're going to have a grass yard there, and you want to turn that into a garden plot. So the first big thing is getting rid of that grass, which can be tricky. Some things like Bermuda grass have these huge underground network of rhizomes that are pretty hard to get rid of even after repeated tilling. So that's pretty much the hardest part, in my opinion, is getting rid of that grass and making that grass so it won't grow back, and then you've got nice soil there, and you're not going to be fighting that grass and fighting those weeds the whole first season you're growing in that plot. So how do we get rid of that grass easily? Well, if you have a tiller, that's going to be the best way starting off, in my opinion, would be to go in there with a tiller, you know, lay off where your plot's going to be, and go in there and chop up that grass. Run over it a couple times and chop it up. And you can do that. I've did it with some of these plots I've had for years. This is how I created them. And then just go in there and till it every week, every 2 weeks, and just keep tilling it, and you'll just keep kind of reducing that weed seed bank, keep taking that grass away little by little, and you'll eventually end up with a nice little plot. Now, here in our established gardens, we don't like to till any more than we have to, and we usually only do it a couple times a year. But initially, to get rid of that grass, it's going to take some intensive cultivation. But once you get it kind of settled and ready and get that grass out of there, then you can start focusing on really building that soil there. So you can till it first. I really like this technique I call the till and tarp technique, and this works especially well if you've got Bermuda grass or some kind of grass that's got a lot of underground material or rhizomes there. So what I would do is I take the plot, lay it off, I till it one good time, then I put a tarp on it, let that tarp sit for a couple weeks or so, and that's going to kill anything on the surface. Pull back the tarp, till it again, put the tarp back on, and just repeat that process 3 or 4 times. And I've done that in a couple test gardens before where I was helping some people establish new gardens, and it worked really, really well. So I really like that technique. You can also add some water after you till it and remove that tarp before putting the tarp back on. That will kind of help get all those weed seeds that are in there to germinate, and then they'll die because there's no light because the tarp is covering the soil. So this till and tarp technique works super well for creating a low weed seed bank, getting rid of any grass there, and you'll have a really good opportunity to grow a great garden there because you won't be fighting the weeds as much. Now, what if you don't have a tiller? Which a lot of people may not have access to a tiller. Can you still do this? Yes, you can. The tarp is going to come in handy big time. If you don't have a tiller, you can just basically go ahead and tarp the area and let that tarp kill all the grass. You're still going to need to chop all that material up somehow or another, whether it's with a hand hoe or something. Go in there with a digging fork and kind of flip it all over. You're still going to need to turn that soil somewhat, but the tarp will by itself eventually help you establish a new garden plot. It's going to take a little longer if you're not coming in there and cultivating it regularly, but you can use the tarp. It's just going to take a little more time to do it without any cultivation. So the two main goals initially would be to reduce the weed seed bank and get rid of those grass rhizomes. Once you've done that and you've got it relatively clean, then you need to start really focusing on your soil health there. Now, I recommend getting a soil test to anybody starting a new garden plot, and it's good practice just to do that once a year. A lot of your local ag extension agencies will do a soil test for pretty cheap, and that test will provide recommendations on how you need to amend your soil. If you don't have one of those offices close to you, there are several places online where you can mail in a soil sample and they'll email you or mail you the results and provide recommendations based on those results. So a soil test is very imperative there. Once you've got that soil test, you kind of know what you need to add to the soil, and sometimes that can be a little bit tricky, especially if some things are just kind of weird, out of whack. Maybe you've got everything but you're missing some phosphorus or missing just one nutrient there. It can be tough to find something just to replenish that one nutrient. I personally think that a good heavy application of compost solves most of the issues that you would have in a first year garden as far as nutrients go. Not to saying you wouldn't have to supplement with additional fertilizers, but if you can get your hands on some good compost, that's a good way to go. Now, you may not be able to find it bulk by the truckload like we have access to around here, and that may also dictate how big of a garden you're growing, how much compost you can get your hands on or how much you can afford. You know, even if you're just doing a 20 by 20 garden, you may just consider going to the big box store and getting some bags of that, you know, mushroom compost or cow manure compost or something like that, and using a few bags of that to amend the soil initially. But I think compost is a key ingredient to success in the first year. You can incorporate it into the soil if your tilth is bad, or if you've got pretty good tilth, you just put it on top of the soil there. Either way should work for you, but try to get your hands on some compost and try to add that once you've solved that grass and weed seed bank issue. Now, I will mention there is one other technique I've not done personally, but seen it done on plenty of videos that seems like it works. It just probably takes a little more time, and you're basically just smothering all the grass and weed seeds. So people will use this thing they call the lasagna method. I think that's the term for it. Well, they basically put cardboard over the area, so the cardboard kind of serves like the tarp does. They put cardboard over it, then put compost on top of the cardboard to hold it down, and then start layering in some organic matter, where it be leaves, wheat straw, wood chips, that kind of thing. So I have seen that done, and that does seem like it works. Just, I think, takes a little bit more time for all that stuff to really break down and turn into good soil there, and you're basically just planting into that compost layer on top of the cardboard the first year. That cardboard will break down, but I don't think it's going to break down really fast. But that is a way to do it. If you don't have a tarp or a tiller, you can certainly do it that way and just smother everything out and take care of your weed seed bank or your grass that way. So we talked about getting rid of the grass, getting rid of the weeds, and doing that initial amending of the soil. Now let's complicate things just a little bit and throw cover crops into the mix and talk about what I think the most ideal situation is for creating a new garden plot. This does require a little more planning. You kind of have to plan ahead here and know in fall that you're going to do a new garden plot in spring. So in my opinion, the most ideal way to do this is to do that tarp and till technique late in the summer when it's hottest outside. That tarp is going to be the most effective at really killing those you know, weeds in there and really reducing that weed seed bank, getting rid of that grass. And then once you've got the weeds and the grass out of there in the fall, plant a cover crop there, a cool season cover crop. Could be anything. There's not really a specific one that works, you know, universally for everybody. You can do like a huge cocktail like I've got behind me here. You can do just a plot of clover like I was standing in front of earlier. Just pick one, doesn't really matter, but pick one and plant it thick and let it cover that area, and that's going to do a lot for your soils until you get ready to plant. Like I said, that does take some planning ahead, but I think that is the most ideal way to do it, is get the soil right, do your cover crop throughout the fall into the spring, and then when you go to get rid of that cover crop in spring, then you can come in there with your compost, you can do your soil test, you can amend your soil and all that good stuff. Now we do from time to time hear from some people who I would call the over planning type. And so they want to take a whole year or so, or maybe even more, to get this garden plot ready to plant. And I don't think that's necessarily necessary. Now if you've got that much time, you've already got an existing garden and you're adding another plot, that might be a great thing. But don't wait to start gardening. You can pretty much guarantee that the first year you grow in this new plot is going to be the worst. You can count on that almost 100% of the time. And every year as you build that soil, build the organic matter, build the fertility, it's going to get better and better. So you just kind of got to get that first year out of the way. Just get the plot ready as good as you can. Go in there, plant some stuff in it, and just start growing. This is a learning process. Even some of us that have been doing it a while learn something new every day, certainly every year. And you just got to start growing. So don't try to wait too long thinking you're going to eventually get this perfect soil and it's just going to be, you know, foolproof and 100% successful, because that's just not the case with gardening. The best thing to do is just, you know, get it right the best you can with the tools and equipment you have. Start growing in there and just be open-minded and learn as you go, and try not to make the same mistakes twice. So if you're a new gardener out there and you still have some questions about how you should establish that new garden, put those in the comments below, and myself or some of our great subscribers will try to help you out. If you're an experienced gardener, please share your tips and tricks for starting a new garden, whether it be raised beds, what kind of soil to put in there, or how do you prepare a new in-ground garden, whether it be the tarp and till method that I like, or the lasagna method that a lot of other people like. So please share your ideas there so we can all learn from one another. I'll put some links below to our silage tarps, which are super helpful for starting a new garden. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and ring that bell so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. And if you did enjoy this one, check out these other two videos right here. I think you'll really enjoy those as well. We'll see you next time.